It's time for Lefties Losing It, and the mystery may have been solved. Who was the member of the media who hit Donald Trump in the face with a mic? Let's play the incident from the weekend, and Trump's reaction here is priceless. This is how I look at my son when he forgets to put the milk back in the fridge.
Mr. President, obviously you're concerned. You're concerned about the situation in Gaza.
Now, everyone assumed that was an accident, a clumsy member of the media embarrassing themselves, but what if it was a little bit more sinister than that? What if it was some TDS-afflicted leftie? Well, perhaps both things can be true, but the woman who has been named as the culprit by various internet sleuths is this one. She is a lefty activist masquerading as a journalist, like the bulk of the US media. She's not special. She even wrote a piece accusing Donald Trump of mimicking Adolf Hitler's language. Yeah. Let's see if there are any more clumsy moments from reporters, but at least we can exonerate this dude. He clearly had nothing to do with it whatsoever. God, I do love the memes at the moment. People are doing some very good work. Now, let's check in with someone the Secret Service should never allow around Donald Trump, but perhaps Elon Musk. This is once hilarious comic Bill Burr, who went a little nutty during COVID and has never really recovered. Maybe long COVID is real. Watch this insane diatribe about Elon Musk, claiming he gave a shout out to Hitler. This is nuts.
Veterans people in the armed services that died trying to stop Hitler, and then this guy comes in, and does that while being an immigrant too, which is kind of the whole thing. Just none of it like tracks how you can be the support the troops, America, love it or leave it, and then this guy comes in and gives a shout out to Hitler.
You know what? I'm old enough to remember just a few years ago when Bill Burr was still funny and when he was mocking those who used stupid Hitler analogies.
He is the reference. Anytime you want to say somebody's evil, you just say he is the next Hitler. Donald Trump, he's the next Hitler. It's always he's the next Hitler. He died like, 75 years ago? Nothing quiets a room like dropping the H-bomb.
Now to a disgusting piece of Jew hatred. This is real Jew hatred in 2025. And as we've seen in the past 18 months, there's been an explosion of these incidents, often perpetrated by the left. The people who call everyone Nazis and Hitler and fascists are the ones that have revealed a virulent strain of anti-Semitism amongst them, including these young ladies in Ireland. Watch the frightening levels of hate and ignorance here as they abuse and spit on a Jewish man.
This is my better side.
Guys, please.
You can take a video all you want.
Guys.
Okay. You're not welcome in Ireland. How are you going to start not welcome in Ireland?
Yes.
You can tell me Israel. Israel is on its way out. Believe me, Israel is on its way out. And you're not... It's really Mexican
I love you too. I hope... Did you just spit on me?
I did.
Okay.
And I actually did not miss.
I think it's time for a trip down memory lane and let us marvel at how Australia's international reputation as a laid-back, sane country with robust, resilient people was altered, perhaps forever altered, when our leaders lost their ever-loving minds during COVID. Never forget the lunacy that was cheered on by the media, the activists and academic class. For those watching overseas, and this segment is watched by millions of people overseas every week, the following 34 seconds features various state leaders and chief health officers starring the sunset-fearing former Victorian Premier Dan Andrews.
Playgrounds, basketball courts, skate parks and exercise equipment, despite the fact that it's outdoors, will be closed.
People can walk the dog around the street. Don't talk to your neighbours.
Browsing is not allowed.
So please, when you open your front door, just think for a moment, do you really need to go out?
If you are at Adelaide Oval and the ball comes towards you, my advice to you is to duck and just do not touch that ball.
There's a whole bunch of people down the Ryback Beach last night who thought the best thing to do was to go and watch the sunset. I'm sure it was a beautiful sunset, but that's not in the spirit or in the letter of these rules.
You got to watch out for those dangerous sunsets. Yeah, that's where COVID strikes most, outdoors, watching sunsets. And let's not forget this gem, then WA Premier Mark McGowan having a woman translate English into English. I still can't believe this happened.
You can die from the corona or get really sick.
You can pass away from this corona, or you can get really sick one.
It's time to get the corona needle to keep people and country strong.
Again, it's time to get them this needle, long corona, to keep them but all the people and country proper strong one.
Now let's hear from this non-binary personal trainer who thinks having a gym for just women is sexist, dangerous, not safe for women. What?
So I keep seeing stories about this new women's gym that's for biological women but no trans women, right? And I just can't help but think this isn't a safe space for women, not for cis women or any women, because if trans women are very explicitly excluded, then that means any woman who doesn't perform femininity the way that the woman that owns the gym thinks they should is they're going to be like, oh, you've got too much muscle, you're not a real woman. Oh, you're a bit hairy, you're not a real woman. Oh, you're a bit tall, you're not a real woman.
No. More like, oh, you've got XY chromosomes, you're not a real woman. Biological reality doesn't care about your feelings or your delusions. Now, more good news for Donald Trump, and even NBC couldn't hide the truth behind this data. The last time so many Americans thought the country was headed in the right direction was more than 20 years ago.
First of all, the mood of the country. This really jumped out. We asked folks, is it on the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44% you say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004.
Joining me now is comedian and host of Primetime with Alex Stein on Blaze TV. Alex, this data is good news for Donald Trump. It looks like a low figure, 44%, but as you just heard there, it's been 21 years since Americans were so positive about the direction that country is headed in.
Well, Rita, I'm sure you can tell from Australia that we had a country with no hope. It was like a car with 4 flat tires. And now with Donald Trump as president, it's like we have a rocket engine. We're literally saving astronauts. So it's just the whole outlook for our country is much more positive now that we actually have a president that is, coherent and making decisions that are in our country's best interest instead of having an actual puppet or, for lack of a better word, just a walking corpse, sadly.
Let's hear now from Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick on what is the end goal of Trump's economic reforms.
$2 trillion deficits don't bother you at all. How could you ask me, while we're running a $2 trillion deficit, and not care? You're destroying the people who have run this country before. Are destroying the future for my children and my children's children. And when we balance the budget, you know what that means? That means our deficits stop. Interest rates come smashing down. How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal. And that's what I'm working for.
Alex, that's the first time I've heard that the end goal is no tax for anybody who's earning less than $150,000. He also made the point there that the US is the biggest consumer in the world, and it's time that they use that buying power to their advantage, to the advantage of American workers. And all of that must be music to the ears of American voters.
Oh, 100%, Rita, because now, listen, you look at our country, it's not the Americans' fault that our economy is the way that it is, our national debt is the way that it is. It's the fact that we have multinational corporations that can take advantage of us. They can use cheap labor in China, basically slave labor. And so the reason is the rules are not fair for these multinational corporations, and Donald Trump will actually create a system that holds these companies and these other countries accountable, and they'll have to pay their fair share. And that's why Donald Trump is going to be such a great president, because he's going to actually help us Americans be able to buy more, be able to finally afford a home and actually make our middle class bigger instead of what Biden has done for the past, 4 years, making it much, much smaller.
Now, we've seen Donald Trump say that Joe Biden's preemptive pardons were not valid. He argues the pardons are void because they were signed via an auto pen and that Biden did not even know about them or what they meant. President Trump wrote, the necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. He also wrote, therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. Alex, is Liz Cheney in trouble? Are all the others that he's referring to there in trouble? Can a presidential pardon be vacated?
Well, Liz Cheney should be in trouble, but I think the idea that they can be vacated is almost impossible because I believe it was Gerald Ford when he pardoned President Nixon that a lot of people were upset about that and tried to get that pardon vacated, and they were unable to do so. So I think if they're not able to do it in that case, then sadly, the Biden administration was able to use an auto pen to get out corrupt judges that arrested children and took bribes to put these young kids in jail. I mean, some of the most repugnant criminals, people that were, child predators, let out by the Biden administration. There's just no excuse for it. And really, honestly, I'm happy that I know this information because it makes me even more empathetic to Joe Biden. And it just confirms what we all knew, that he was not in charge of anything and that there is a deep state, or there were people that were making the decisions for him the entire time.
I'm wondering who you suspect is responsible for Joe Biden's decisions, because, of course, we've talked at length about Biden's term being Obama's third term, but who within his inner sanctum was really making those calls? Was it Jill Biden? Did we have our first female president without even knowing?
Maybe. I mean, maybe it was Jill Biden, but the person that was making the decisions was probably the same person that left the cocaine in the White House. It was probably that same person, Rita, if I had to speculate.
The person with the 18, I think, Secret Service agents, which have already been removed while this program has been happening. Apparently, Donald Trump has pulled those Secret Service agents so Hunter Biden can look after himself. Alex, let's have a look now at Benny Johnson interviewing folk about Black Lives Matter. This is shortly after BLM Plaza in DC was torn down.
What has Black Lives Matter done for you?
That's a strong question for you to ask. Especially me. What Yachty say all they did was buy mansions?
Little Yachty is a rapper, and he's out saying, like, they bought a bunch of mansions.
BLM was literally a scam. They had bought mansions and...
No, that's definitely a scam, 100%.
Yeah. 7 mansions is not the best use of $100 million.
Do you see any of that money?
No.
Did they ever reach out to you and say, hey, you're a veteran, we can help you?
Never.
They raised $100 million. Did you see any of that?
Did we ever see any of it?
I ain't see shit of it. The $100 million has not benefited the black community.
Alex, was there much fallout from the decision to tear down BLM Plaza? We saw some wild emoting in the usual places, the Washington Post and the New York Times, the painful destruction of Black Lives Matter Plaza, and Black Lives Matter Plaza is gone. Its erasure feels symbolic. But beyond that, I didn't see much fallout, not many protests, not many people making a big deal out of it.
Well, you saw everybody that Benny spoke to, Little Yachty basically just exposed it. He kind of put the final nail in the BLM coffin that this was a money laundering or Ponzi scheme for Patricia Cullors and her family that were able to buy mansions with this money. And seriously, if the African-American community actually benefited from all the donations from BLM, people would love that. But that's not what happened. The black community were used as a prop in order to raise money. And where that money went, some say that it went to people's, private mansions. Some say that it went to the Biden campaign. So all I know is that marginalized black people in America did not have access to all the money that was supposed to be raised for them. So it was a scam, and now it's been exposed. And it's it feels kind of good to just be able to move on and start a whole new, trajectory for helping out the marginalized under Donald Trump, not taking advantage of them to raise money to help out the Biden crime family.
Now, at the very top of our chat, you mentioned astronauts being rescued. I've been shocked by how little coverage this has received. You would think this would be a momentous occasion. These two astronauts stranded in space, and Elon Musk has successfully brought them home safe and sound. And it seems to be now more reporting on, whether they were grateful to be rescued or not, or whether they were doing important work whilst they were stranded. I'm shocked that this isn't something that's bringing the country together.
Well, Rita, it should, but you know why that they were left in space is because Joe Biden didn't want to give Elon Musk a win. He didn't want to make Elon Musk look like a hero, considering Elon Musk and Donald Trump had become good friends. So they were left in space for political reasons. I mean, Joe Biden literally, instead of deporting illegal immigrants, he deported 2 astronauts and made them live on the International Space Station for 8 months. He's doing it wrong. The Americans are supposed to stay in America, President Biden.
Oh, that is hilarious. But you know what? Elon Musk, I think, is copping even more hate and vitriol and just completely demented commentary from segments of the media than even Donald Trump at the moment. I've, again, been shocked by a man who is, essentially a businessman doing a role assigned to him, being treated like he's, some sort of war criminal. It's absurd, but it gives us something to laugh about. Alex Stein, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Rita. Talk to you again soon.
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, there was a fascinating piece in The Economist in recent days, and what it essentially reveals is that what politicians have claimed for so many years about immigration fueling economic growth and raising living standards, well, that may not be the case. The results depend on the type of immigration. The well-educated immigrant on average contributes more than they take, but low-skilled immigrants are often a net drag on public finances. But they cost the taxpayer more than they contribute. Kosha, I'm reminded of a often quoted comment from a famous economist, Professor of Economics, George Borges, who said, immigration redistributes wealth from those who compete with immigrants to those who use immigrants, from the employee to the employer. And that's, I think, a big reason why we're seeing this massive political realignment in the West, where working class people, aspirational people have kind of realised the policies of the left don't actually work in their favour, and they've switched their vote to the right, and we're seeing people who are very affluent switch their vote to the left as well. It's just a fascinating time.
100%, because the latter group loves their nannies and their gardeners and all the trappings that come with that at the expense of the working class, who in many ways is cut out of the conversation. And to your point, that's why populism is ascendant, because it's giving them a seat back at the table. The first thing that I found interesting about that piece actually is that The Economist even decided to write that story on the heels of the New York Times yesterday writing about COVID origins and all of that. So something is happening with mainstream media, that they're acknowledging what everybody else has seen.
A few years too late, I would have to say. It would have been nice to see the New York Times do that when it actually mattered.
Yes.
Instead of
very easy,
calling everyone conspiracy theorists for even suggesting that could be a possibility.
Totally. And even now, there was no apology or anything like that. But that is interesting that The Economist is doing this. The crux of the economic argument, as you say, is that ultimately, at its core, if you've got a very generous immigration policy and a very generous welfare state, it's a recipe for disaster. And there's precedence for this. So in the US, from 1850 to 1912 was the biggest era of migration from Europe. And something like 30% of people went back to Europe because they couldn't make it. And there was no welfare state to fall back on. Whereas now that creates a perverse incentive for people that are net takers rather than producers to come in. So that's kind of the crux of what's in this piece. The last thing I would say that it didn't get into is the cultural cost of immigration outside of economics. And that's another thing that's sort of been the third rail. You can't talk about it, or diversity is always our strength in every circumstance. And that's another thing that I think is now unraveling a little bit, where people are seeing actually it's really difficult to run a harmonious society with just different groups of people with very different cultural backgrounds all trying to coexist.
Now, let's talk about President Trump. Earlier today, he confirmed that the Kennedy files will be released in full. Let's hear from the president.
I don't believe we're going to redact anything. I said, just don't redact. You can't redact. But we're going to be releasing the JFK files, and that would be tomorrow.
Kosha, we're talking about some 80,000 pages, but will we ever know the truth? Have they destroyed anything that would clarify who was involved in the assassination of the president, who was complicit?
I think this time next week we'll have a little bit better of an answer to that question. People are cautiously optimistic, but very, very skeptical because they've been burned before for decades, as President Trump said. And even in the first Trump term, he had alluded to that the first time around and then didn't, which added to the conspiracy thinking that, you know, what was so bad that he couldn't release it or what were the reasons. The key is releasing it, so he is following through. I think we can believe him on his word there. Not redacting it, because what's the point if it's released and so much of it is redacted? He did say there that it will not be redacted, so we'll see. And then the third is, are there code words or is it, are files deleted? That we won't know. But in this day and age of social media, I think 80,000 pages will very quickly get processed and summarized by all sorts of people, and we will have a better picture.
Well, this is another thing. What if they have not destroyed the key points, but they've buried it somewhere in those 80,000 pages? That is a lot of documentation to go through with a fine-tooth comb and find something that may reveal something we don't already know. Now, the president also today spoke about Hunter Biden's protective detail. He just learns in this exchange that Hunter Biden has 18 Secret Service agents protecting him in South Africa. Why is in South Africa in the first place is a question the president would like answered.
Sir, there were 18 Secret Service agents protecting Hunter Biden in South Africa this weekend. Who's paying for that, and do you plan to revoke the Secret Service protection?
Well, we have done that with many. I would say if there are 18 with Hunter Biden, that will be something I'll look at this afternoon, okay?
Sir?
I just heard about it for the first time. So you have 18 Secret Service going, where is he exactly?
In South Africa.
In South Africa. And South Africa, you know, is on a watch list, you know that. Because what they're doing to people is brutal. And I've stopped having money go to South Africa, you know that. Billions of dollars. So he's in South Africa. That's very interesting. All right, I'm going to take a look at that. Thank you very much.
Well, there goes the protective detail. 18. Why does Hunter Biden need 18 people? I know he gets up to some mischief, but that seems excessive.
Oh boy, and it's funny when he learned it in real time along with the rest of us. So it's really interesting. I was looking into this in terms of the entitlements of Secret Service for former first families. It is governed by statute, but only for the former president, his or her spouse, and minor children.
Minor children. Hunter's what, in his 50s?
In his 50s. So this is discretionary, and it's up to ultimately the sitting president to revoke that.
Now, we also have to speak about this news report that the Trump administration is contemplating a new travel ban on more than 40 countries this time. They include countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Cuba, Bhutan, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Sudan, Venezuela, Yemen. So they can't call this a Muslim ban again like they did last time. There's a number of countries there and plenty others I haven't named. Are we going to have another travel ban under this administration?
Possibly. I mean, it is one of many strategies in his overall policy around immigration and national security. And the premise here is that those some 43 countries have very dubious vetting policies of how their end of the bargain of what has to happen in terms of vetting people that are coming out of their country and coming into the U.S. Now, this was the original time that we saw judicial intervention in the first term with him. So I think the team is smarter now. They have the benefit of that hindsight, and they have a Supreme Court ruling in their favor because they did win, and the Supreme Court upheld that in 2018. So I think they're on firmer ground, but we do know the judges are going wild right now, so I would expect more of that.
The activist judges, I mean, you talk about a constitutional crisis. That's the constitutional crisis. There's activist judges who think they can overrule the president, and it's astonishing. They do get overturned, but for a period, you've got some lowly judge who's determining national policy.
31 of them right now, active cases where they're a single judge somewhere is doing these nationwide injunctions on matters of national security.
Before you go, we've been talking this week about the polling. The polling has been fascinating. There are different polls, and as we know with Trump, the polling is often underreporting his support. But there was a CNN poll showing that the Democrats have got record low figures, 29% approval rating, and an NBC poll this week showing Trump having the highest figures he's ever had. What do you make of that? Because so much of the coverage is relentlessly negative, not just negative, but crisis mode negative. And yet it doesn't seem to be impacting public opinion as much as it used to.
I think that it's just run out of its potency. If you look at what they did before, Russia, 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 Hitler, 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 it just, when everybody's Hitler and Russia, everything that Trump does is that, then nothing is that. Plus people can see just eventually policy becomes real and it comes to your pocketbook, your kitchen table, and that has been happening for so long. And when they're just seeing the improvement in the country and the border went literally in a month from an insane amount of crossings to practically zero and all the rest of it, people are happy and they don't think that he is the Hitler-Russia puppet that they once thought he was.
You can only cry wolf so many times, Kosha. Thank you so much for your time today.
Sure.